All right, I think I got all of our background logistics done. And first of all, I'm just going to apologize because I run our meetings, but I also run the Zoom. So I have a few technical things I have to do before we can officially get things kicked off. But welcome, everybody. Thank you all so much for tuning in and joining us today. We have an exciting presentation coming up, but before we jump over to our speakers, because Resilient Jacks has not met in a while, I do have some updates from exciting things going on in the city of Jacksonville when it comes to resiliency. So for those of you that do not know, my name is Shannon Blankenship, and I am the chair of Resilient Jacks, joined today by many members of the Resilient Jacks Steering Committee, which help to guide and give direction. Oh, Barbara, let me just. All right, can you guys see me?
Yep.
Let me just do one more setting for participants since we have a lot of people joining right now as well. I'm gonna.
The checks came and I took the packaging off the desk.
All right. I'm muted, folks. So of course you'll be able to speak up when it's time to go around for updates, but I just want to jump into some of the agenda items as more people are joining the conversation today. So the first thing that I'm really excited to talk about is becoming a member of Resilient Jacks. This is something that, you know, for a long time we've been talking about growing the coalition and getting bigger, but we haven't really given folks an official way to join before. So I'm going to screen share right now some options, some links for you guys so that you can see some ways to join, and hopefully this works out for me. Okay. Let me just check my form right here. All right, so I have a few different tabs on my browser that I'm going to show you guys today. But what I've done is I have some links and I'm going to throw them into the chat window. But this is going to allow any individual or any organization to basically submit, I guess I'll call it an application, but submit interest in becoming a member in Resilient Jacks. And what we're going to do, the steering committee is going to capture the submissions from both organizations, and let me see if I can tab over here, for individuals as well. And that way, what we're going to do is, if you've been on our website, you've seen we have Resilient Jacks, we have who we are, we have about, and then we list our founding members, the steering committee organizations that formed Resilient Jacks in the beginning. But now we'll actually be able to list additional organizations and entities that are interested in resiliency, you know, support our mission and support climate change policies, and you can read our mission statement and everything here to make sure that this is something that you agree with. And then if you do and you submit, then we can really work to grow our coalition that way. So not only can individuals become a member, but also organizations become a member. And I have a question in here: how many individuals, members, followers, or supporters does this organization represent? And what you'll be able to do, or what we'll be able to do eventually is, you know, for example, when we write letters to city council members supporting legislation, maybe when we write letters to city council members requesting, you know, improvements to legislation, we're going to be able to say how many people we represent as individuals within the city of Jacksonville or within our communities, because we have many different organizations that are a part of this coalition. I think this is going to help us to elevate and to showcase how many people we really represent. So So this is something that's new. This is something that is going to be a part of our website in 2021. But for now, for today, what I'm actually going to do when Ashante starts speaking next is I'm going to paste these links into the chat window so that those of you that are on here today can go ahead and submit this information. And that way, when we actually populate the website and go live with it, we'll already have the list of folks on the call or on the meeting today that have joined. So you'll sort of be a part of it from the very beginning. I will also like to plug that membership is free for all of us that are joining right now in the beginning. I don't know if that'll always be the case, but obviously we're really looking to, show how many organizations, how many people believe in resiliency in Jacksonville. I think it's going to be a big number, but I want to grow that number and get big, get to sort of a critical mass, which we've talked about a lot in our steering committee in terms of what that would mean before we put any kind of, payment or restrictions and things on what it means to be a member, what member benefits are, and things like that. So we're a new organization. We're not a 501c3. Again, it's a coalition of organizations. And so this is a way that you can sort of advance yourself and your mission statement within this mission statement. So that is my intro to what's been going on with Resilient Jacks. A lot of behind the scenes stuff happening with the steering committee, but really trying to put more structure around the organization. And I have a few other things to sort of give updates on of what's going on in the city right now. And then I'll jump over and see if we have any questions before Ashante gives some updates from herself. So the next thing that I wanted to give an update on in terms of what's going on in the city of Jacksonville with resiliency, for those of you that don't know, there's a few different special committees that have happened around resiliency in the city of Jacksonville. One of them is the Adaptation Action Area Working Group. This was a working group that was formed. I was a member on the working group, and we finished our final recommendations that were approved and adopted in 2019. Those recommendations have now been crafted into legislation that is being advanced through the city council process. And you guys can see the status of where it's at the different levels here. And what it is it fully implements or sort of adopts the revised maps that show where the sections of the city of Jacksonville that are vulnerable to sea level rise. And the definition of that we came up with was a category 1, 2, or 3 storm surge. Where those areas are within the city, those boundaries have been mapped. And then there are essentially, this would take those maps as well as some of the text that went along with those recommendations, and it would make it a part of the comprehensive plan for the city of Jacksonville. While this is not, really quick, immediate, strong legislation, it's merely an addition to our comprehensive plan. What it does is it validates a lot of what the working group came up with in terms of how we need to be more prepared and actually be proactive in the face of sea level rise as opposed to reactive. And so what I'm really happy to announce is that actually the Planning Commission, as well as the planning department, obviously they authored this. The special committee on resiliency advanced it. The planning commission approved it, and land use and zoning approved it as well. It hasn't gotten any backlash yet, and so there's not really a need to do sort of a full operation of writing to our council members to approve this. It's kind, I don't want to say it's sailing through, but it's making its way through without objection. And so that's a really good thing. I'm really happy about that. And so we haven't needed to sort of, rally the troops with Resilient Jacks to shepherd this through. And it is really, really comprehensive. I encourage everyone to check out the PDF of the report and things there, but it's a lot of language there. It's a lot that is going to be added to the city of Jacksonville's comprehensive plan. So again, I'll take questions or comments on that in just a minute. Just want to get through a few other updates of things going on. The city posted the Chief Resiliency Officer position. This is public on the website. If you want to look at it, if you want to send it to anyone to get them to apply, this is the information here. And again, I'll share all these links in the chat window before when Ashante starts her presentation, so that if you want to do that, you can. But this is great. We've been waiting for this for a long time. It's very exciting to finally see it up here, to know that the position is going to get filled. And so all good news on those things there. And then the last thing that I want to share is the final report of the City of Jacksonville Special Committee on Resiliency. And I did see that it says final report draft, so I apologize. I think they're still working out some of the edits within it, but it has been approved by the Special Committee on Resiliency. So it is advancing to City Council next for approval. But as you can see here, this is 96 pages. There was a lot of people, a lot of work that went into coming up and preparing this final report. Anyone who attended the Special Committee on Resiliency final meeting, you know, they discussed how the special committee met every 2 weeks for several months in 3 different subcommittees. The one subcommittee that I was in actually broke into 3 different subcommittees to really sort of fine tune and make sure that there was a really comprehensive look at what is going on in the city when it comes to specifically flooding and drainage issues. And we know, I know many of us have highlighted the need in this group that we need to be looking at more than just adaptation and flooding and drainage. We also need to be looking at mitigation and how we're actually going to deal with climate change and our impact and continued impact on climate change. So those comments were, I think, very well received at the meeting where this final report was submitted. But those are the updates from me when it comes to what is going on with resiliency in the city of Jacksonville at a very sort of high level, some big things that have happened recently. And now I just want to open it up to anyone that has any questions or feedback about some of these things, and just, you know, general thoughts on where we're at in the city when it comes to resiliency. Todd, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Appreciate the wonderful work getting this organization going and all you did for the City Council Special Committee. My question is, do you know who's applied for the County Resiliency Officer position? And second, has the Steering Committee of Resilient Jacks decided whether to endorse someone? Because I think if there's a consensus around one candidate, we should weigh in to all of our city council people and to the mayor for that person.
That's a good question. I'll say my answer really briefly, and then anyone else who has a response to that, please, you know, raise your hand or unmute. I know that some people that have applied for the position have been speaking to the city council members, just because I heard the city council member say, I know someone that applied for the Chief Resiliency Officer position. So that's all I know. When it comes to endorsing someone, you know, we don't get the submissions or the applications. So maybe someone else on the steering committee or someone else in this process might want to, you know, give an opinion on if we need to insert ourselves more in the process of trying to see some of the folks who are applying. I'm sure that the folks that are really, you know, really working this in terms of that position might reach out to us. And Todd, I feel like you just opened it up to encourage them to reach out to us to learn more about their candidacy and their vision. But yeah, I'd love to hear from someone else on this.
So I just follow up. I guess I'd like to suggest that anyone who is applying contact someone, a Resilient Jack Steering Committee, so the steering committee can then set up perhaps an interview process. Maybe there can't be a consensus around one candidate, but if there could be, that could be very powerful.
Okay. Yeah, I will echo that. Anyone's welcome to reach out to me. Of course, I'm going to put some links here in the chat window in a minute. Dr. Geller said that one of the candidates had reached out to him, and like I said, I know some people that are applying are being, thorough in terms of reaching out to folks in charge, but I haven't myself come across any names, so that's the end of it for me. Any other comments on some of the updates going on in the city when it comes to the resiliency stuff before I turn it over to Ashante?
Hello, everyone. There's something going on with my camera today on my phone, so I'm sorry you guys can't see me, but I'm so glad to see all of you. My name is Ashante Green, and I am the part-time communications and outreach coordinator for Resiliency Jax. And pretty much today, I just wanted to say hello to all of you. There's a lot of new faces, and I wanted to make sure that you guys are aware of different ways to engage and to share the mission of Resiliency Jax. So one of the main things I am over is communicating via social media. And we are in the process of growing our network on specifically Facebook and Instagram. So if any of you have upcoming events, have interesting articles that you come across when it comes to resiliency, or just something that you feel needs to be communicated or is interesting, even down to flooding photos, I'm happy to share those. You all are welcome to email them directly to me at resilientjax@gmail.com. That way it can be shared from there. And then the last thing I wanted to share is that as an organization, Resilient Jax, we're just really trying to share climate stories and to understand how individuals and citizens in Jacksonville is impacted by the need for resiliency, even down to flooding and some of the other stressors. So we do have a Google form link that we would really appreciate you take your time to participate in and share among your network so we can start to collect those stories and share them out. So Shannon will put the email as well as that link in the chat. And if you guys could share that, that would be great. And then lastly, please take some time to follow us on all social media platforms. It's going to be Resilient Jax. We share everything on our Facebook as well as our Instagram. That's about all I have for you. I'm happy to take any questions. And just thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashante. I just want to, by a show of hands, I see a lot of faces here, and I know people also have. If you don't know how to use the raise hand feature, click on participant, and next to your name or at the bottom of the list, there's a raise hand feature. But did you guys receive the newsletter that we sent out? It was our first MailChimp newsletter that went out to all of the subscribers of Resilient Jax, but okay, thank you. I see Jimmy saw it, Todd Sack, John, excellent. Oh, Bart, I love just seeing, people move their hands around in the video screen. That's nice too. So excellent. Well, if you did not receive the newsletter, go to resilientjax.org, and on the home screen, there's a subscribe feature, and that's how you get the newsletter. I did put Ashante, our excellent social media and all other things coordinator, created the newsletter, and she put links to a lot of the things that I already, sort of brought up today. So you would have seen some of those things in terms of the legislation, the chief resiliency officer position, but as well as the announcement about the meeting today. So those things are there. Make sure to subscribe, but trying to find a way to get everyone as connected as possible. But with that, unless are there any other questions about the updates or social media? And I'll put some of the links in the chat before I announce our speakers that folks would like to say before we get to today's presentation.
Shannon, I see 2 hands up right now.
Sure. That's Jimmy, I think, just because I asked him to raise his hand if he got the newsletter. So thank you for doing that. I'll lower it in a second. I am going to announce our speakers or introduce our speakers. And Raylan, if you want to go ahead and share screen, do you have the access? Go ahead and put your PowerPoint up. So today's guest speakers, I'm going to breeze through a few acronyms, but then I'm going to tell you what they stand for. But once you hear what they stand for, you'll realize why we use so many acronyms. So Raylan Means is the administrator for the North Florida LTRO. That's the Long-Term Recovery Organization, as well as for DUVAL COAD. COAD is Community Organizations Active in Disaster. And Raylan is going to be joined by John Sapora, who's been a longtime member and participant in Resilient Jacks meetings. John is the Disaster Recovery and Resilience Manager for LISC Jacksonville. Both of these organizations represent a host of other organizations and do similar work that we do in convening organizations with a similar mission to come together. And so I'm very excited to hear from them today about their work and the similarities with resiliency. And with that, I'll kick it over to you, John and Raylan, to get going.
Thank you so much, Shannon. And hello, everyone. It's nice to see some faces here on Zoom today. We appreciate you guys giving us this opportunity to share a little bit about what's been going on with the COAD. So yes, I'll just use COAD and LTRO from now on. But the COAD exists to bring together a host of organizations, both in the nonprofit sector, as well as businesses and government agencies, to do exactly this that's on your screen right now: deliver hope and foster more effective preparedness, mitigation, response, and recovery for DUVAL. The COAD is a national model. It's also known as a VOAD, which would just be a voluntary organization as opposed to community organization. But it's a national model that is used across the nation to be active throughout all phases of the disaster management cycle. And it's built on these 4 C's: communication, coordination, collaboration, and cooperation. And so in many communities, there is a COAD or VOAD that exists as this coalition to bring together a diverse group of people that can be active not only in recovery, but also preparedness and mitigation. So how did we get here? Many of you know, or probably all of you know, that Hurricane Irma hit in September of 2017. There were a lot of needs here in Duval County. We had over 112,000, households register with FEMA. And so without an active VOAD at that time, there needed to be a group that could come together to serve the community in its long-term recovery efforts. And so that's how the LTRO got started. A lot of great people and organizations came together to form it, and we've been active ever since. We've served more than 2,000 households, not just with home repairs, but a lot of our partners assisted with food and with replacing furniture and with rental assistance and other needs that surfaced following the storm. The LTRO itself has a home repair program that I'll talk about in a little more detail later, which is allowing us to serve households that couldn't find assistance anywhere else. So as this LTRO effort has evolved and continued, and we're still working on our recovery even now, everyone realized very quickly that we couldn't let what happened with Irma happen again and have a dormant coalition that wasn't already in place and already active and working together to address future storms. And so during the summer of 2019, a steering committee formed that would be able to bring together that evergreen coalition that could not just be a recovery organization as the LTRO has been, but could focus on some other aspects of the disaster management cycle. And so John Sapora was able to lead that effort and eventually became the chair of our COAD. Last summer, when we formalized our structure, we now have bylaws. We have an executive committee that serves as our governing board for more or less. Just like Resilient Jacks, we don't have our own 501c3 status. We are just a coalition right now. And so we have our fiscal sponsorship through the Nonprofit Center of Northeast Florida. So these are all of our registered members. There are 40 plus organizations represented here. These have registered with our COAD to agree to provide some sort of resource or service or time in the event of a disaster activation. But I will say that beyond these 40 organizations, we have a contact list of over 200 people that regularly get communications from us, that are invited to our roundtable calls, which we hold quarterly right now. And then we do extensive follow-up reporting and call notes that we send out to that 200 plus contact list. And they're able to in turn push that information out to others, you know, when it's relevant. So those roundtable calls are a great way for us to share information, not only about what's going on, but also raise any unmet needs that our agencies are facing and that they could use some help with. And we average 50 to 60 people on those calls, and they're currently held quarterly. However, I will say that during the height of the pandemic last year, we were holding them much more frequently, and they served as a platform for everyone to talk, especially when we were all at home during the Safer at Home order. So a little bit more about our home repair program. This is one of the more tangible things that we are doing to not only contribute to our recovery, but also hopefully future resiliency of these families and the community at large. There are a lot of families that were impacted by Hurricane Irma that either were uninsured or underinsured. They received minimal to no assistance from FEMA, and the needs of their homes were just too great for them to address on their own. And so we have focused on bringing those homes back to the HUD standard of safe, sanitary, and secure. We've done 84 homes to date, and our goal is to reach 100 by June. This has all been done through private donations. A lot of corporations have given to us, as well as charitable organizations and individuals. We've had faith-based groups contribute funds. We've had Volunteer Florida awarded us a $450,000 grant that we're operating under right now. And it's being matched with local funding as well. So this has allowed us to not just do temporary fixes. A lot of organizations early on with Irma were able to just patch roofs or, you know, stop the leaking so that things wouldn't deteriorate further, but they weren't able to do holistic approaches to these homes. So we have focused on doing full roof replacements to protect the envelope and harden the home. We've had doors that wouldn't even shut that we've been able to replace so that they have us not only secure for a storm, but just secure in general. And then because of the time that has passed, a lot of the homes that were damaged by flooding were subject to a lot of mold infestation, and we've been able to deal with that too. So it's very apparent to us that we're not only improving their home, but we're improving their quality of life. And hopefully that we're giving them a chance to be able to withstand future impact and recover more quickly if we should be hit by a future storm. So this is what we've been facing. So the pictures on the left are not at all uncommon for our contractors to come across when they're replacing these roofs. Many of these homes, they've not been able to do anything with their roofs for years and decades in some cases. And so we're seeing a lot of wood rot and a lot of just years and years of neglect that we're able to pull off, put brand new decking in, and then give them this beautiful new roof that's here on the side. So there are a lot of neat stories that we've come across along the way. And our work has been recognized with a couple of different awards. In 2019, we received the Collective Power Award from the Nonprofit Center. And that was just a testament to all of our partners working together rather than operating in silos, just coming together through our coalition and being able to collectively impact our community. And part of that was that we were able to get a video done through WJCT. And so this hyperlink on this page, I can put it in the chat as well, is to just a brief 6-minute video that gives you a little taste of what our homeowners have been through and what this means to them as they move forward with their recovery. And so now I'm going to pass it over to John, and I know he's going to get into a little more detail about what the COAD is doing.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Just one point on the home repair program. I think through my work at LISC, Local Initiative Support Corporation, we have good relationships with neighborhood-based community development corporations. And so they have served as our construction managers. They do home repairs in their neighborhoods in mainly Northwest Jacksonville. And we've used contractors that are based in the neighborhoods where these homes are located. So I think it's a way to, to bring funding. Over $1.2 million has gone into this home repair program, and so it's really helped to build these contractors. So I think a lot of the donors have really been excited about that sort of multiplier effect, for the economy. As we know, a disaster can really affect an economy in a neighborhood. And so that's one of the elements of the program. So it's not really based on volunteer labor, which is a big factor when you have a major storm. And we did have Builders Care and another home repair program that also worked with volunteer labor as well. So we really had 3 different home repair programs. So I'll turn now to just some context with the disaster management cycle. If you think about a storm event, right after that event, and frankly, right before the event, the government agencies like the Emergency Operations Center, Emergency Management, which in our case is the city's Emergency Preparedness Division that is within the fire department, the Sheriff's Office, the Fire Department, Emergency Management, JEA, other governmental agencies are going to do an immediate response, first responder, search and rescue, securing critical infrastructure, clearing roads, government buildings are secured, hospitals, that kind of thing. But early on, nonprofit organizations are active as well. If you think about the Red Cross, obviously, Salvation Army, Feeding Northeast Florida, a host of other nonprofits really come in very quickly. And those are some of our members. But there's also a larger group of nonprofits that are active in disaster that will work with clothing and food delivery and providing resources into church-based social services in neighborhoods. So the immediate response, and then you move around to longer-term recovery. As Raylan said, we really have had a very robust long-term recovery organization, and Michael Boylan has been our chair and has helped to raise a lot of these funds. And so when we hired Raylan, that really allowed the organization and the operation to take off. So we really appreciate her work. And then you move around the disaster cycle and you think, what have we learned? How can we prepare and really mitigate the impacts of future disasters? So that's where in our bylaws, in our mission, it's about mitigation and preparation. So we look at education and community awareness. We're doing some training exercises with the Emergency Preparedness Division with our key stakeholders to really do practicing for the next event. All right, next slide, Raylan. So we really have some priority work groups that we focus on. At the Emergency Operations Center, we have a chair, a seat at the Emergency Operations Center like the Red Cross does, Salvation Army. There's a ham radio that's engaged and emergency communications. So we're connected into that in an immediate response situation. Then you have other organizations that deal with mass care and bulk distribution, mass feeding, the sheltering. The city sets up shelters, but the Red Cross and others really help to operate the shelters. And then there's a special needs registry for people that might need special transportation to evacuate or to be rescued and to get on that list. And then logistics and staging and warehousing. Volunteer management and donations management are a real key element of what a COAD does all across the country and across the state. If you think about well-meaning people wanting to donate all kinds of things that may or may not be useful, the government really doesn't want to be handling a truckload of unneeded items. So that's where the COAD can really help manage that information, and we work with the United Way on volunteer management, the unaffiliated volunteers, people that are not already engaged with the Salvation Army or trained with the Red Cross. A lot of people want to volunteer their time. So the COAD in an emergency situation and in a longer term recovery will help manage volunteers and donations. And then emotional and spiritual care, looking at the faith community. There's a lot of training about how to go in and work with people to do not only damage assessment, but also emotional and spiritual care with the trauma that we find. I mean, these homeowners that we have met are still traumatized by the storm from Hurricane Irma. So these are the working groups that we have. So a little more about our values and goals. We definitely embrace diversity of residents and neighborhoods, and we really try to use the disaster recovery and preparation and response work, just like Resilient Jacks, to really build community, to build connections across neighborhood lines, across racial and ethnic lines, economic lines, because it's really about a whole community approach. We also, if you think about it in a stressful emergency situation, ahead of time clarifying roles and responsibilities of different organizations. Some organizations are going to lean in right away after a storm, but some are going to hold back. For example, the United Way with the First Coast Relief Fund, they would be planning how to allocate funds out to different organizations, just like they did with the pandemic. Next slide. Part of our culture is to try to break down silos and really to share information and resources among our different organizations. I think that's why the LTRO network receives some of the awards, because we really did try to work together for some common goals. To make and to pay particular attention to lower income people in our community that really don't have the resources to recover. It's amazing how many people are still suffering quietly from storm damage. And then finally, there's a whole community approach that really FEMA has described in their emergency management system. But the emergency management system at the federal, state, and local level, frankly, depend on local community-based organizations and resources to really take care of their own residents and businesses before, during, and after a disaster. For all the hundreds of millions of dollars that you see with Rebuild Florida through federal agencies, it's really about the local response. So I think that's so important to remember, and our home repair program is a good example where it's totally non-governmentally funded, and there's still need out there. All right, next page. So let's talk a little bit more about how these disaster services might align or even integrate with resiliency. We really see that in our mission, the education and training and network and response is really part of getting ahead of the impacts, which is really what resiliency is all about. And it's well known that every dollar that's spent on reducing the impacts or avoiding the impacts or adapting saves $6 in future recovery costs. And as you can imagine, with these so many different disasters all over the country, it's just an unsustainable model to just keep providing federal and state funds to rebuild and repair in the same way. So I wanted to remind us of the City Resiliency Committee's definition, really fits well with what the COAD's definition and mission is the ability to collaboratively prepare for, prevent, absorb, and recover from chronic stressors and adverse events. So I think there's a lot of alignment there with mission. And then, of course, the Chief Resiliency Officer in one of the action steps in the committee report is to coordinate with this kind of disaster coalition because of how it relates to resiliency. All right, next slide. So I want to talk just briefly about some of the challenges that we have as a COAD. The emergency management system is a command and control system, like military authority because of the nature of the work. And so how that aligns with our nonprofit culture is a challenge. And so I think we have a good relationship with emergency management, but I think just acknowledging that there's this clash of cultures, I think it's about mutual support. The second is, in this pandemic, as much as so many constituents want to have a sustainable, evergreen COAD, it's really difficult to maintain that. We do not have funding beyond our June 30th work with the home repair program. And so we are fiscally sponsored by the Nonprofit Center, and they've been fantastic to help us with our financial accounting of our programs, but we're still challenged to raise money to sustain the coalition beyond having just an all-volunteer board. And then as a discussion question, I'd like to just ask, how do you see the ways that this disaster coalition aligns and even integrates in with the mission of Resilient Jacks? And that's my question, Shannon.
I was going to say, is that like a final thought and we can applause and like think on it more, or were you just asking me a definitive question? Well, I think to answer your question, COAD and the LTRO are doing work that needs to be done, that I'm hoping Resilient Jacks can complement, although not, duplicate that work. And so really thinking about how to when it comes to your interactive circle there, focus on that preparation section to really think about the policies that can help to, prepare us for more water and more frequent storms in terms of getting people out of harm's way. And then, hopefully preventing people. We're not going to prevent storms, but we can prevent people from being impacted by storms through smart planning and good policies. But I think that, working with COAD helps us to hear some of the stories and hear some of the ways that people are being impacted in a long-term way from those storms, so that we can, be smarter about the policies that we are advocating for. And so, John, I just want to thank you for being so active in Resilient Jack since we first formed, to, kind of continue, I think, to push me in the direction of, you need to be thinking about this, and you need to include this, and you need to involve this. And I hope that, we continue working together in that way, so that there is overlap without duplication of efforts that you guys are doing through COAD, but that we need to do through Resilient Jacks. And then would also, of course, open up the question to everyone on the call today. As we learn more about COAD and what they do, and what's going on in the city of Jacksonville in terms of disaster response and disaster preparation, what questions do you all have for Raylan and John, and hopefully it'll get to, how Resilient Jacks can help with that. David, go ahead. Hopefully you can unmute yourself. I'll go. Okay,
there we go.
Yeah.
The cost of helping somebody who's been damaged, like with a new roof and so forth, I guess is pretty much paid for by donations and grants and so forth. My question is, have you looked into maybe some ways of guaranteeing financing with for folks so that you can get more, especially as you get into the preparation and the prevention modes, to do the types of capital investments that are needed to be more resilient, to harden the properties so that they're not so vulnerable, and if there's some way maybe of facilitating a private investment in that for the homeowner property owners, so it's not all dependent on government grants and so forth.
Sure, David, that's an excellent idea, is to really get ahead of that. And we are looking at how to create more of a mitigation home repair program on the east side with the historic East Side CDC. And that is a factor is how to help homeowners if they can qualify for financing to do that. But I think it's mainly a grant-based program that we're looking at. The other thing is that FEMA and HUD do a lot of retrofitting grant making. So we're looking at how to, in the future, work through the city to provide funds to do retrofitting of homes as well. Other questions or comments?
Well, John, I don't mean to throw the question back at you. I hate it when people do that, but what opportunities do you see for Resilient Jacks?
I thought you'd never ask. I would say that there are so many opportunities to engage with these organizations. They really need more volunteers, trained volunteers, the Red Cross, Salvation Army, other organizations. I think that's a real practical way to get engaged with really frontline, very practical work that's being done. So I think if you want to sort of move beyond the policy level and the education level, I think being engaged with different organizations, sort of plug in that way. Some other examples are like when St. John's Riverkeeper or Groundwork Jacksonville has a cleanup day, to go and really, participate. There are, these days with the pandemic, there are food drives and other ways that, the pandemic is a huge disaster, obviously, and so many organizations need volunteers. So I think that's sort of a very practical way. That's also a way, I think, for the Resilient Jacks Coalition, to sort of learn what the practical impacts are and the challenges, so that then that will inform the policy discussions as well. And also, I think what we've done with the coalition is really try to diversify the coalition. With my work at LISC, as I said, working with neighborhood organizations in diverse communities, it's a way to engage with them on the needs that they have and the volunteer needs and the opportunities. So then you can get to know people from different neighborhoods. So I think that's a really important opportunity that will grow your membership and the diversity of it.
Thank you. Those are great.
Dr. Sack.
Well, thank you, John. Call me Todd, please. Great work you're doing. I was surprised not to see the medical community in your list of associated organizations. The Medical Society after 9/11 created a disaster preparedness response corps, and the state actually was involved in helping train lots of health professionals, physicians and nurses and others. And email me and I'll link you up to the Medical Society Foundation. I'm on their board, and we just need to get them to receive your information so that we can recruit physicians and nurses to help out.
Well, thank you. One of the connections we have made is with Eric Anderson at the Regional Council. He's the facilitator of that healthcare coalition. And so that's how I keep up with the healthcare. And also Raylan and I during the pandemic have a good relationship with the health department as well. But I understand the volunteer group for medical professionals doesn't exist at the health department level anyway. So
No, and that's why we need to plug into the medical society, because they have direct
Okay.
access to the emails, and there's a leadership group that had a response corps already trained, ready to go. They're prepared for things like nuclear attacks and toxic waste, but also flooding and hurricanes and things like that. So a good opportunity to plug them in.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
John, this was great in terms of also getting the word out into the community. I think there were close to 40 people here listening. And I think probably a lot of us are not aware of what COAD was doing. And also it's very reassuring to me to think about all the resilience money that seems to be suddenly being written into legislation, whether it makes it or not, I don't know, but both nationally and statewide, that there are volunteer groups also that are going to be monitoring some of that and knowing where to put it. It sounds to me like COAD could use a lot of money and do it well. And it's good to know that you all are going to be smart enough to know whether it's being spent well and whether or not you get your share of grants, I would think. Is it an issue?
Well, it is. I would say Raylan and I participate on a statewide COAD work group around the COADs around the state, and so we're looking at really how the HUD state-based Rebuild Florida program is working, or frankly being very slow as far as repairing homes. So so that's one way we're trying to advocate statewide, and just having a COAD active is and Resilient Jacks for that matter is so important when we do have a storm, because there will be volunteer organizations that will want to come into our community and help, but we need to have the structure, the organizational coordination to find them housing and just some basic, connections into the neighborhoods where they can do their work. But yes, we are challenged with funding. It seems like it was easy to get, or not easy, but easier to get funding for the immediate needs, for the home repairs, all that work after Irma. But we're in blue skies now, and so how do we keep this coalition going with a great staff person? We would also like to add a case management function. We've responded to some apartment fires. That's a hazard that a COAD often helps with as well.
Well, resilience planning goes on during blue skies, hopefully.
Hopefully. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions for John or Raylan?
I've got a quick one, Shannon. This is Brooks. Hey, John. Hey, Raylan. John, you probably saw that in the special report, the final report to the special committee on resiliency, that there was a recommendation to have the city develop a disaster plan for heat, not unlike what they do for everything associated with wind and water and storm and so forth. We're seeing heat issues crop up more and more, and the difficulty that it creates for the underserved portion of Jacksonville is pretty significant. And I wondered what your groups are doing to address that, working with the city on preparing a plan like that. Has there been that kind of dialogue? And what thoughts might you have around that?
Well, I would say that our COAD has not engaged the city on that particular issue. I think ideally we would be able to engage on the preparation and planning side, but it hasn't been something that we've engaged at this point.
Okay, well, that sounds like something that we'll need to continue to push from the the vantage point of the recommendations coming out of that report. And I suspect the city hasn't done much in that realm either, but I think it's a real issue. We had some very critical dialogue around that as we prepared the environmental planning portion of the report. And I think we need to get some traction on that. So thank you, John.
John, I think what I heard sort of overwhelmingly, at least in terms of your call to action for Resilient Jacks today, was that, you have a lot of organizations that you're working with that are active in disaster, and you need volunteers. You need like physical people, bodies during the times when you're trying to respond. And I just, first of all, yes, of course. So I really want to make sure that we get your message out with our subscribers for when there is a time of need. And so please make sure that we're communicating. And that way, if you ever have a call to action like that, that we are, echoing that and trying to, get as many people out to support that work as possible. But I'm just curious, does that normally follow a major storm, or, and I know because I've attended some of y'all's meetings, home repair seems to sometimes be, months, even years later, when you can get the funding and when you can get, things sort of around to actually doing the work. So do you think that the volunteer needs are most specifically around when disasters occur, or is it just ongoing and always that you guys need volunteers helping with some of this disaster recovery?
Raylan, why don't you take that one?
I think everyone needs volunteers all the time. I think that COVID has really thrown a lot of our organizations for a loop, because a lot of them rely on corporate groups that will send employees in, and the corporations are not doing that. So some organizations that come to mind are, Feeding East Florida is always looking for volunteers, and that's an ongoing need to address food insecurity. I know that the American Red Cross is always looking to train shelter volunteers ahead of storm season. And I know that they were very concerned last year that they did not have the numbers that they need. And then, in some of the other organizations as well, our goal is to be able to affiliate volunteers with the response organizations ahead of time, because dealing with unaffiliated volunteers in the midst of it is not ideal. But we do have plans that we've developed to address unaffiliated volunteers that could be taken through a volunteer reception center following the disaster. And we've worked with the United Way's volunteer platform to set something up. But I would say that there are needs right now in the community they would be more than welcome to take on anybody who's looking to contribute, some time right now.
Well, excellent. Well, I will make sure that I collaborate with you guys after this to make sure if there is sort of, any specific things that we can send out to our membership, that we do that now, and that we make sure that we're connecting regularly so that I can do that in an ongoing way to always try and drum up what if people have an interest that is matched with some of the needs that you guys have, that we're trying to link those two things together. But I do want to turn it over to anyone here in the audience today, because we haven't met in 3 months now. If there are updates from community partners, community organizations, or just things that you want to highlight or bring up, feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself, just whatever doesn't make it get crazy. And I'd love to hear from everyone now before we end the meeting today. Well, just in case no one does raise their hand or say anything crazy, I really want to thank Raylan and John for joining us today and telling us about the work of the LTRO and COAD. We really appreciate it. I hope that eventually many of the members that you listed in your form today will echo the members that we have in Resilient Jacks, because I think that we're all looking to do similar work, and I hope there's a lot of overlap there with the people that are wanting to do that work. Mr. Richardson, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Most of you all have participated or attended past environmental symposiums. I just wanted to, if you hadn't received an email from me yesterday, just wanted to let you know that we are beginning the planning for a good event, hopefully this year, September 17th. Stay tuned for more details. But I can let you know that it is very likely that that symposium will focus around resiliency and share a lot of work that a lot of you all are already participating in. And I'm sure that we will have Resiliency Jacks prominently featured in some way. So just wanted to say that. Thanks.
Mr. Bruderly, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, maybe everybody's already done this, but I basically did some web surfing yesterday and discovered on December 27th, the Congress passed the Energy Act of what they call 2020, Energy 2020, and I found an executive summary on that. I was quite impressed with the amount of funding that's already been put into this program, in addition to shifting policies from the previous several years. So if folks want to see where the money, where some money could be coming from, that's a good thing to look at. It's the Energy Policy Act of 1920. I found it on the U.S. Senate website. The other thing was that they had a hearing on February 3rd of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, is chaired by Joe Manchin, West Virginia, with the minority leader is Barrasso from Wyoming. And they had 5 presentations that blew my socks off, frankly, with respect to the fact-based presentations, the scientific content, and the presentations were totally focused on climate and what do you do about it, and are laying the groundwork for, I suspect, will be several tens of billions of dollars of requested appropriations that will be made available to communities on a public-private partnership cost-sharing basis. So one of the action items, I think, for this group is to start figuring out or laying the groundwork with our elected officials on how we can get our community stakeholders positioned to share in these cost-sharing types of funding opportunities. And frankly, they're looking outside the box on this stuff. They're looking not just for traditional grants, but they're looking for investments in innovation and research and development, demonstration, and then deployment of anything and anything that would reduce the carbon footprint of this of a community. And even though we don't have a friendly administration in Tallahassee, I think there's a huge opportunity, since we happen to own the electric utility and have a huge transportation hub infrastructure, and also have a pretty good green building oriented group of professionals that are active, that a little bit of planning and upfront organizing could go a long way towards creating some good sustainable jobs here in Northeast Florida, as well as reduce our carbon footprint.
David, that's great. If I could connect you, either get a link to something that we can get on our website. John Burr's been, in case you guys haven't seen our blog from John Burr, he compiles relevant climate change information from all over the country for us. And Ashante's been doing a great job of broadcasting that on our social media networks. But I'd love if there's some little snippets of things that people might be able to take away from that to get that on our climate change in the news. Is there anyone else that wants to give an update before we say farewell for the end of the day today? Well, again, thank you to John, Raylan, thank you to Ashante for speaking today, but really thank you to everybody that joined the call today. A lot of new faces, which is awesome. Thank you so much for joining in, but I do hope that you subscribe or join as an individual or an organization so that we can try to grow the importance and the capacity of resiliency in Jacksonville. So feel free to email me if you have any questions or reach out to any of us. It's all in the Resilient Jacks website that I put right here. Or sorry, that's just to one. I'll do it to everybody. But yeah, stay tuned. Join us again. We'll have our next meeting. I'll put details up on the website and put it out in our newsletter. And just thank you all for participating and have a great rest of your afternoon. Bye, everyone.